Uh, okay, so today we are going to be so last week or even on Monday we dived deeper into the Django REST framework. However, we couldn't deploy the API, and so today we are going to be focusing on deploying our API. And after that, if we still have some time, we are also going to brush up on React, the background of React, the problem React is trying to solve, why it exists, and if time still permits, we are going to start coding up in React. And the connection here is that we are trying to build a to-do application with the potential to extend it to even include geospatial components. But we are starting off as just a simple to-do list on the browser where you can type in what you want to do and save it. But this time around, the save or the to-do list creation, updates, delete, editing is going to be interacting with the API you're going to build with Django REST framework. So we are more or less building a full stack application. And if time permits, we're also going to include our knowledge of web mapping, and not only we will be able to create a to do, we're also going to start adding location component to that to do. If you say you want to cook in the evening, you can just point or click on the location where you want to perform the activity and say, okay, I'll be cooking in this location. If you want to visit the market, you'll be able to pinpoint on that location that, okay, I'll be visiting this market that is in this location. So that would also be something interesting to work on so that we can be able to more or less put together all our knowledge. Once again, thanks for joining this call. And um, yeah, let's jump right in. So last week the first meeting we had was just to more like give us a background of Django REST framework, and I used like a restaurant setting to explain how um, client and server architecture works, and I really hope it helps us to understand it. Um, then, of course, you can definitely catch up with the recording on our YouTube channel. And then after that, we went into getting hands-on, where we were able to create a simple to-do list API. As simple as that looks, this is actually how most APIs are created. I don't want to make us to start creating complex API, but to be honest, what we are discussing here are best practices, right? That's why I'm trying to ensure I leave no leaf unturned. I'm trying to ensure I touch almost everything that I think are really best practices that would help us in future projects. For example, bleach. This is something you rarely find uh, in tutorials online, but it's something that is very important when you're working on API. You need to be able to um, remove the bad guys. And I think I tested this by using the script tag in JavaScript to send it to do. And I demonstrated how it looks like and how Django handle it by default. But then with this library, we can be able to do more. Uh, so then I'll be talking about pagination. I think we couldn't do this last on Monday because of time. But the concept of pagination is more or less to reduce the workload on your database. So if and even your backend, if you have a to-do list of over 100 items, of course, to do is like the very simplest thing. But think of the API as something that's repowering even a bigger application. This is just a starting point. So if you have an API that is powering a bigger application, and take for instance Facebook. So when you go to Facebook, Facebook does not fetch for you all the posts they have on their database. They fetch it for you batch by batch, and that's the concept of pagination. When you go to Facebook, they fetch for even uh, LinkedIn comments, even Twitter posts, like almost all applications use this pagination. What they fetch for you first is the top level, or more like a part of the entire thing they have on the database of the entire data set. They can just fetch for you, say 12 or 20 of the entire data set they have. Then they will put a button with probably read more or load more. So when you click on that button, then they fetch the next 12 or the next 20, and then there will be another button again that will be load more. Then when you click on that button again, they fetch the next one. So that's how they fetch it for you batch by batch, instead of them just dumping all the thousands and millions of data they have on the database for you. So that's actually what's happening. Some of these things are automatic. For example, on LinkedIn, when you are scrolling on LinkedIn, there's nothing like load more button. And that's what we call infinite scrolling in the web ecosystem. That as you are scrolling, when you get to the end of the page, or before you get to the end of the page, they immediately request for the next batch of data sets to to present for you to see. So this pagination reduces stress on our database so that we don't exactly need to be querying all our database for data. That can be very stressful, especially imagine if thousands of people are trying to request and make connections to the database to fetch all the data sets. It's going to lead to some server errors or server issues. That'll be a lot of workload on the server. So that concept of pagination is something that is very important for you. And thankfully, Django REST framework has this handled for us. So let me just open that right away. So this is something that comes out of the box to Django REST framework. So it's not like you have to do it manually. It's already inbuilt of the Django REST framework. So let me show you the way that is. So on the Django REST framework website, when you go to API guide, you can see pagination right here. So when you click on pagination, it's just some settings that you need to put in your settings file. It's as easy as this. Just open your settings file, copy this, and paste it. Sorry, just want to confirm you can still see my screen. So let me just paste this here. So yeah, this is as easy as this. So if we have okay, let me just start up the server so we can see how it interacts. Oh, so I'm using a virtual environment, so I need to start up my virtual environment so I can be able to run the server. So there are different types of pagination. We have the page number pagination, we have the limit of sets. Everything is on the Django REST framework right here. And the beauty of it is you can also set pagination side, you can modify it. After all, everything, they are just a bunch of classes, so you can always override, and you can see even at the class level, you can set your pagination, your preferred pagination, and this is how it looks like. You see this count, you see next, you see previous, and you see results. Instead of you just seeing all your data at once, you see all the total data you have in your database, you see how to get the next piece of data, you see how to go back to the previous, and then you see the results. So we have different types of pagination, like different types of them. So let me just show you how that works. So in as much we are trying to use a to-do application to explore Django REST framework, I feel it's still important we know what the best practices in when developing API, because by default you don't really need this because you're just building a simple to-do application, right? But then it's something that is important for you to know when you're building APIs for even more complex applications. You need to consider pagination. You don't just send all your data to the to the front end. So I think the server is up. Let's see how it looks like. Not found, of course. I think it's to those. Okay, so you can see now we now have count, next, previous, and results. But this is strange actually. Why is this not certified? Let's check what. Well, not to bother about that. Let me just go to the API docs and see if that will work. So those strange. Very strange. So this is supposed to display very well. I honestly can't figure out why this is acting up like this. Static. Anyways, but this is what I want us to actually see. I think that, during the last class we created 4 to-do items. Okay, maybe I should just remove this so you can see how it looks like without this. Let me comment this out. So if I comment this out and I refresh this, okay, the server is coming up. So let me refresh this. You can see we just have all the items returned as an array to the front end, which doesn't really make sense. So now you're having, okay, now we have just 4. So let's make the page size to be 2. Of course, this can be more than 2. If you have, it depends on your choice. You can edit this the way you want. But what really matters is whatever you set here is what will be returned here. Page size. Okay, yeah. Yeah, you are. So this is the pagination I was looking for. This is the one I use a lot. Page number pagination. So yeah, there are a lot of them actually. You have the limit offset, you have the page number, so you can already explore that in the documentation. But this right here, this has more. So when you set this page size, it has more effect when you are using the page number pagination compared to the others. So yeah, you can see this one. So you're able to see page equals to 2 because of the page number pagination. So it's different from the limits offsets. So they have different purpose. But I think this is much easier because you can be able to specify it even on the URL that, okay, even though I want to get all the to-dos, just put a question mark that I want the to-dos on the second page using page equals to 2. And of course, it's going to fetch you, which is the third one, because the page size here is 1. So it's going to be returning 1 object from the database. So because we have 4, let's increase this to 2. So it can return 2 to-do items. So let's see. So you see now we have 2. So now you can click on this to go back to the previous, which is like the first page. And now we have next, previous. Previous is now null because there's nothing else. Like this is the default page. So This is the root URL. There's no page before this. But if you go to the next URL, you will see that there's no more next URL because we have reached the last two items. But of course, there'll be previous to take you to the previous page. And if you check the URL here, you see this page equals to 2. So this page number pagination is mostly used. That's why if you check most of these, I don't know if Twitter has it, but there are different websites where you can see read more, load more. I don't know if Ashnode or Medium, I don't know. But there are different platforms where you see load more stuff. Let me just see if it's probably here. So they don't load all the content for you at once. They load a few of them. But what's happening is that they, under the hood, of course, they are. And I think there's a so now if I keep scrolling, they are using infinite scroll here. As I'm scrolling, they are automatically loading the next ones. So basically, they're just calling these endpoints. They will call this endpoint under the hood and then display the content for you. So it's not like they load all the 1 million articles they have. You can see, you see this loading screen. What's happening under that loading screen? They call it skeleton loading. So I'll start using some front-end terms now since we are trying to go into React so we can have a smooth one. So this skeleton loading that is happening, let me scroll down a bit. So this is what we call skeleton loading. It's more or less like this platform trying to call the next URL. And let's see if that's what they are doing. Let's just inspect this. So as developers, this is like the first thing you do when you visit the website. Especially backend developers, you inspect the network to see the API calls they are making. So let me scroll down. So as I'm scrolling down, you can see this URL. JavaScript type equals to auth, page equals to 4. More or less, they're trying to make an API call to the 4th page. And this is the result of the API call. You can see all these blogs. These are basically API response that they're not displayed. So if I scroll down again, they will make the same request, but this time maybe the 5th page. You can see JavaScript type equals to auth, page equals to 5. Basically what it's trying to say is, we are on the JavaScript tag. That's the tag we are trying to. That was what I clicked here. I clicked the training tag, JavaScript. But this is the 5th page. Page equals to 5. So they are not like making all the code to the backend to fetch all the JavaScript data they have on their database. That's not effective. You want to kill your database doing that. You paginate it, and that's what is happening here. So I think they use their own page number limit is 10. We count from 0. That's why it's 0 to 9. And ours is 2. So you can basically manipulate this. You can make yours 10. You can make yours 20. It's depending on how you want it. And that's the beauty of using this page number pagination. You can use the page number to set limits on the amount of data you want to return to your front end. So this happens everywhere. So this is like best practices that even though we are using it to do applications to go into the Django REST framework, it's still important for us to know it, because at a point when we are building a front end, our to-do might be more than 5, might be up to 10, and we might want to start looking at pagination. Even at that small project, it's something that will be very, very useful when we start building advanced projects. So yeah, let's paginate it. Let's just leave it as, since we are building a small to-do application, let's just leave ours as 10. Yeah, so that's what this is all about, pagination. And then the view sets and routers, I think that's even what we use for our API. It's just like the fastest way of building an API in Django. If you go to our views, under this to do, we use view sets, model view sets, which is coming from the Django REST framework.viewSets module. We have the model view set class. Now we inherit it right here. And what did we do? We just provided with our serializer that we already defined earlier, our query sets, and then our permission classes. So this can be more than one permission class. But for now, we are using the permission dot allow any, meaning allow anyone to access our to-do list. If you use permissions dot is authenticated, for example. So all these things, it's not like I'm saying it out of my head. It's because I use them a lot, so it comes naturally now. But should you have any issues in remembering even the types of permission that we have in Django REST framework, you can just come to the API and then you go to permissions, should be somewhere here. So right here, permissions. And then you'll be able to see all the permissions that we have. There are a lot of, in fact, you can set this permission even at the settings level under this REST framework dictionary. Let me copy this, for example. You can set it here. Here's our settings right here. So this REST framework dictionary can accept a lot of settings for the Django REST framework. I can put that of permission here. That's the default permission class for my API is authenticated. But of course, anyone I put here would override the one on the settings. So that's the priority. That's the chain of priority. Anyone here will override anyone that is here. So let me reload this. You see, authentication credentials were not provided because I've changed my API to be is authenticated. So now it's forbidden. So this is, of course, this is very important when you're building a public API or API for a web application. You don't want to expose your API to the public. That hash node that I showed you earlier, if I hit that endpoint, this is what I'm going to see. Because they have already passed a token to access the resource. That's why they can be able to display it on the website. But if I grab that endpoint and then hit that URL, I won't see anything. So that's just by the way. So now let's go into API deployment. So when you are done building your API, it's important you deploy it. It's very important you deploy it. So maybe I should just mention that I did not really want us to go into authentication and permission because there are various ways to go about it. And if you have to go into that, it's going to take a bit of time. So I think it's something you'll be able to do easily later in the future because there are existing libraries you can use. Maybe I should just mention a library that would be useful for you in case you want to do authentication. Like you want to sign people up on your platform, you want to sign in people, log in, log out, this kind of authentication stuff. This library will be useful. This is very relative and it's project dependent. That's why I don't really want to go into it because it can change. So yeah, this guy right here is a library that I just plug and play. You can use it to get all this sending email to users, resetting password reset confirmation, resetting username, token, logging in, logging out, JWT. So the JWT is JSON Web Token, JWT refresh, JWT verify. All these are really like a different thing entirely that will take a lot of our time if we want to go into it. But it's easy at the end of the day, and it's usually dependent on what you want to build. So you don't just build an authentication system. Sometimes you want to include some permissions, and so. But these are things I'm very sure you'll figure out on your own easily. It's not really something much difficult. And then I should mention that when using these libraries, you would also use signals. I assume you have experience with signals since you already did have a Django background. So signals are like the way you do stuff. You react or respond to actions that occurs in your database or in your backend. Say after a user is registered, you want to send the user a welcome email. Welcome to my platform. Thank you for registering. These are your best guys to use. You just have a post save signal. That's after the person has been saved on your database, and then grab the instance of the person. That's the user instance. grab their email and then just send your email to them. Maybe later on, if time permits, you might also look into this, but it's generally simple to implement. And when the user activated, updated, so you can also like just use signals for those ones. But when the user reset their password, these are the stuff you use. And when you see websites with login with Google, sign up with Google, it's called social auth, social authentication. That's when you see a platform that asks you to sign in with Google, GitHub, LinkedIn, and stuff like that. They are called social authentication, and they are also easy to implement with the help of this libraries right here. So, yeah. Then there's another one, DJ REST auth. Now that's the beauty of using Python or Django for backend. No matter what you want to build, there will surely be a library for it. So you just go to the library, click on documentation, install, add to installed apps in your settings, and that's all. Just code the URLs and you are good to go. You don't need to start implementing the custom one for yourself. But of course, you can also implement a custom signing in, signing out, because at the end of the day, what they all use is what we call token. And there's a library in Python that you can use to create and validate this token. Yeah, it's called PyJWT. So this guy right here can help you to encode a token. And what do you mean by encoding a token? Meaning putting some data, which can be the username of the person that is accessing your website, the password of the person, the details of the person, and everything. And then using an algorithm to hash it. So when you hash the data, you see some gibberish like this, which is very funny. And of course, when you get this kind of gibberish, you can decode this gibberish to get back the data that was hashed. It's some really complex cryptography that is happening here, so we are not going to be going into that, of course. But that's just the underlying concept behind most of this library. That's actually what powers most of this library. They use this PyJWT to encode and decode. So, and if you want to, so the point is, if you want to build yours from scratch, you can of course use this library from the scratch to build your own token, to verify your token, to refresh your token, and everything. So authentication is a different thing on its own. We have OAuth, OAuth 1, OAuth 2. You use that majorly when you're trying to interface with social apps like Google, Facebook, and the likes. They mostly use OAuth for authentication. So these are the concepts that you start getting exposed to when you are getting deeper. You just see that you are understanding it little by little. So don't worry. There are a lot of interesting concepts that you start getting exposed to, such that when you see a website like this, the first thing you want to do is just to check you inspect it to see what's happening under the hood. Like I do that a lot because you also get to learn. Like the one I showed earlier now, I can learn how they respond, like how their API responds to queries, how they paginate, how they do all their settings. You know, you can learn. These are big companies. You can do it for Facebook, do it for Twitter, do it for anyone. You can see how they write their variables. Let me go to network, for example. In fact, from that, you can be able to infer the kind of backend they use. Let me see the one that makes an API call to the backend and see if I can show you what I mean by you trying to infer what your backend is written with. Okay, yeah, let me click on this. So from this level, I expand this, I can know that, okay, they use Node for their backend because this is camel case bookmarked in, you can see the I is in capital letter, cover image. Of course, I might be wrong, but JavaScript, when you're writing JavaScript, you mostly use camel case to define variables or functions. It is rare in Python. In fact, it's not really part of Python standard to use camel case. In Python, we use snake case. Let me just show you what I mean by that. You can see this. This is snake case. Permission underscore classes. This is camel case. Is authenticated. And the reason for this is because it is a class. So of course, in the class, we use this kind of case when defining classes. For variables like this, we usually use camel case. So I can infer that, okay, they probably use the JavaScript backend for this. that they most likely use Node for this. Even aside that, this underscore ID, you can just infer that I'm thinking they use Node for this backend. And of course, you can already learn how they name variables, date added, cover image, it's very descriptive, publication. And so if you're building your own API or building your own models, when you're defining your models, here we used created at, and they use dates added. You could just learn something new. So you can decide to change just to dates added, and so you can of course learn something when expecting this kind of. So there's always a lot to learn when you're writing API. There's always a lot to learn. So don't worry, you would definitely catch up. You can. It's a very interesting space. So um, yeah, that's by the way. Let's remove this authentication. This, of course, you can also set it to allow anyway, so that you can be able to access it. And then we have to comment this out because even though we use allow any in the general settings, the global settings, this one right here takes the priority. Invalid page because it's not existing. So we used 10 for the page size and we only have just 4. So there's no next and no previous. That's why they are now. That's why you saw invalid page earlier. Yeah, so that's by the way. So I just feel I should mention that. I just remembered we did not talk about authentication, and it's a very important thing to talk about. So for course, I'm not sure if I showed us course earlier, but let me just show us there's this library for handling course. So course is cross resource sharing. So this library right here would add course header plus origin resource sharing header to any API response. And this is also more like security checks. You don't want anybody to just access your API, so you can more like add some URLs to your whitelist, and it's only requests from those URLs that your API would be able to process and respond to. Otherwise, it's going to be throwing cost error for that client, which is very good for security. So again, you're not building this from scratch. Just install this library, add it to your installed apps in settings, and include this middleware before the common middleware, all in the settings, and then define some variables. So when you define this variable, this list, then this is where you include all the website that you want to have access to your backend. So it's usually the front end and then the local host for React or for any front end app you're using. You specify the local host because at least during development, the front end would make requests to the backend. So you have to allow it to make the request. But of course, after deployment or after development, you can remove it and restrict it back so that your app can be secured. So, is there any best practices tips? So for this, I already mentioned this. I think we are even using it. This Swagger. I don't know why it's not working. It's very strange. I don't even want to do any debugging. That would take a lot of time. So, but yeah, I think I showed this in the last class. When you go to Swagger, you see the API documentation. And so this is what this library does. So you can see a lot of libraries to do stuff in Django. Don't have much stress. Okay, now so let's deploy our API. So when you want to deploy your API, the first thing you do is do some security checks. And when you want to do some security checks, you start from the settings file. So there's this comment that comes with Django when you create a Django project, and it says don't run with debug turned on in production. By default, debug is usually true. Oh, maybe that's the reason why this thing is not working. Let me try it now. Debug is usually true, and it's not safe to have debug mode true. And the reason is because, can you imagine, that's why you can see the beauty of having debug mode being turned on. So even if anybody see your API, like the URL to your API, and they want to check your documentation, they won't see this. They will see, what was the error it was even given before? They will see the error, Django login, like you have to log in. And that makes sense. Like that's even the starting point of security. You can see debug first. Oh, this is strange. So why was it? Oh, let me just go back to this one page and come back to it. See if this thing is caching. What's the title? It's very strange actually. Can you imagine? Nothing was changed and this thing started working. Should I retalk? The doc is not working. Is this thing cached? Sometimes you might need to go try some things. Can you imagine? So this thing is cached. So that's another thing we've not talked about, caching. So Django does that out of the box as well. And I think maybe these guys, because they're using the library, maybe they also do it. So when you visit this URL once, it gets saved, stored in your cache. Maybe you can verify that. So if you want to check your cache, it's usually in your browser. Just inspect it. Inspect your URL on your browser. Go to memory, application rather, and go to cache storage. So you can see Mapbox. Mapbox, if you load Mapbox base map, you also cache the ties in your cache. So you can see that's why sometimes it loads fast. So this also helps to load fast. Then the cookies. So of course Django uses CSRF token for their own authentication system. So this is where they store the token under the cookies. Session storage, local storage. Smartbox stores a lot of things in this local storage. So I think this is not cached actually because I can't see anything that has to do with Swagger, except this is Swagger that we are not aware of, or maybe this HTML tag is Swagger. But the idea is when you visit the website, they just store it in your local storage or anywhere or cache so that when you make the request again, instead of it going to the backend to make another request or another API, SQL query to your database, it just loads from the cache. But you get the idea of security because if you go and say you want to hit this endpoint in incognito, because incognito does not store anything in the cache or anything it's incognito, it doesn't store anything in the browser. You can see that it's asking me to log in, and it's because of this debug being false. If I set debug to true, so let this reload. If I set debug to true, and then I go to that same incognito to visit this URL, it's going to work now. You can see, so that's like usually the starting point of security. Just before we move away from security, about caching, there's also like a section for caching here on the Django REST framework. It also comes with Django REST framework in the sense that when your front end makes a request to the backend and then you respond to the front end, you can cache your response on the user browser for a particular period of time, say a minute, a second, or anything, right? So that the front end will not keep making requests to the backend every time, especially for content that don't really change, that are not really dynamic, right? So this also happens. So like this REST framework is very powerful. There are a lot of things that you can learn from this REST framework. There's also throttling. So throttling is also a way of preventing multiple requests from your from a client. So those that hack, they do this a lot. When they keep sending multiple requests to your server goes off. Like they keep sending requests, they keep eating your request with a lot of random requests. So you can use throttle to more like prevent it, such that when you see that a client that is a single IP is sending a request to your backend continuously, you can throttle it to okay for anonymous. That's what this anon means. That is people that are not registered on your database or on your backend. Let them give them the option to only make a request of 100 requests per day. Why for your user, those that are actually like your users on your database, let them make a request of 1,000 per day. So that's the concept of throttling. It's also part of security that you need to set, and it's as easy as also copying this and putting it in your settings under REST framework dictionary. Yeah, this one. Just click on here and paste it. So you can now decide to change this from per day to per hour or per week, just any valid timing. So that's one security concept as well. Then versioning. So versioning is something simple. There are different types of versioning. So versioning is when you want to release multiple versions of your API. So this happens a lot when you should, because by default most projects you just start off with the base features, and as you progress you want to work on new features. So you can use versioning to more like separate several APIs. So versioning is very easy. You can do it different ways. You can do it even from this top level URLs. You can this to those now you can attach version 1 behind it, and that's to tell you that okay, all the to-dos in this app, that is this app, is for version 1. You can see because I use version 2 here because we had it. This was the first to do we created, and we created a new one for it. So there are different ways to go about that actually, but you can definitely read it up. And so my point is this Django REST framework is very powerful and it's well documented. That's what I love about it. It's well documented, like. And last but not the least, which I must not forget, is testing. It's very important to test your API. Even though you might not need to test your simple to the application, but it's an habit I would really encourage us to also to get used to, because of course it's not always easy to write tests, but it's something that is always helpful to prevent bugs, unexpected bugs, because we are working on the back end, and the back end is like the foundation of anything you are building. If anything happens to your back end, if any bug happens, it can cost the company millions of dollars or millions of naira, as the case may be, or millions of cedis. So it's important to test your API to prevent future bugs and to make sure the API works the way you want it to work. So it's pretty easy to also test in Django REST framework. It has the API request factory, and you can use to model how API requests will be coming from the front end, and then you can see how you can define the response as well. You can even authenticate and yeah. So that's another thing you do when you are talking about API deployment security. So I just demonstrated for about the debug mode. So debug should be false. Then the next one is allowed host. So this allowed host is basically the which server do you want to give access to communicate, or to communicate with your own server. I think I'm trying to find the best way to explain it, but the concept is when you deploy an application and you want to visit this API, this Django project, this allowed host is where you put the URL of the server that is hosting your Django project, or the URLs in the case you deploy it in multiple locations, so that when an API call is made to that URL, Django will know that okay, this URL that is it's in this API is allowed to make a request to this API, because at the end of the day, URLs are just more like so URLs are more like an IP or like a beautified IP address, right? Because at the end of the day, these URLs map to a DNS, to a domain name service, and then they map to a server, which is the IP address of the computer that your API is hosted on. So Django needs to know the IP address of that computer, which in turn means the URL of that computer or that your deployment, before it can give access to it. Otherwise, it's going to throw you an error that this URL is not registered in the allowed host. That is, it's not allowed to, it's not the place where this Django project is hosted. So unless you provide the URL to Django, Django will not respond. It will throw error to not respond to that URL. Because under the hood, a lot of complexities are happening. In fact, on a single server, you can deploy multiple applications anyways. So that URL is just a way of letting Django to know that, okay, this URL is the address of where I'm hosted. Like this is the address of the server I'm hosted, because Django does not know anything about the computer. You can host Django project anywhere. So it needs to know where it is hosted, so that if a request is coming to that server where it is hosted, it can know how to respond and how not to respond. So what we go here is showing the URL where it is hosted. Something dot herokuapp.com. So we are going to be using Heroku. So that's why I'm using Heroku app. And of course, it can be anything. It can be something dot aws.east.com or anything, Python anywhere, And then there's this way of just capturing any URL, which is of course less secured. And that way is by putting asterisk. So when you put asterisk, Django will capture requests from any URL and respond to that request. But if you know the specific address of the server where it is hosted, just provide the URL here. But because even though we are trying to deploy our application, we want to use Heroku, and Heroku usually give us some random URL. So let's just put asterisk for here. And after we are done installing and deploying on Heroku, where we have gotten the URL from Heroku, we can now edit this and redeploy again. So that's another thing. There are a lot of security settings in Django which I want to go inside. So I added this documentation here. One of them is secure SSL. This is to ensure that all requests that is coming are secured. They are not coming from HTTP websites. They are coming from websites with HTTPS. It's padlock. This padlock here. Connection is secure. You can see. So that's the idea. It's also a way of proving security of your backend. So if you just uncomment this and make it to be true, if I make a request to this on our backend, it's going to throw an error. And let me see and it shows how that looks like. So let me save this. Well, maybe this is because it's okay. Maybe let me deploy this on shows. I think it's because it's bounced. That's why. But the idea of this is it doesn't accept requests. Let me see if I can maybe add HTTP to it so you can see it's gonna work. Yeah. So I think this is what you probably see when you're hitting this URL from HTTP. And then if you go to your Django settings, you'll see the comments that is coming from Django. You're accessing the development server over HTTPS, but it's only support HTTP. So let me see what is gonna happen. Okay, I'm calling this. Trying to experiment here actually. But we're gonna get a clearer picture when we deploy this on Heroku. So this guy right here ensure all the requests to this server is usually secured. Cool. Um, yeah, let's proceed. So when you're deploying it, we can, of course, if you click on this, you can always get where the URL is on and where the documentation is on Django documentation. There are a lot of security settings actually. You can see, so there are a lot of them. So let's clean up our code and fix any bug. Well, so far there hasn't been any bug. Let's see if we can clean up our code. So cleaning up, you can remove all these unused imports. So that's one of the ways you clean up your codes, by removing the unused imports. So we don't need this because we already defined it in the general settings. I think I explained this during the last class. This is more like a way of overriding the default response from the view sets. You can override the response, you can specify a message, do all sort of cool stuff. So is there any cleanup needed? Yeah, let's add help text to most of this. Be completed. Let's add help text to completed so that it can help in documentation. So this is very important for front-end guys. They need to know what this stuff represents, the status of the task, what this field represents. So completed is the status of the task, if it's completed or not. So it's a Boolean field. Then this one is the to-do task. Okay, I'll leave it that way. So is there anything we can do here? Of course, a lot of cool stuff we can do in the models, but that's beyond this session. So URLs, is there anything uploaded in? We can remove this and then use it. Serializers. So yeah, we can do this like this. So I think that was basically all the cleanup we need to do. So then what else? Environment variables. So yeah, this is also another best practices that you need to know. Environment variables are more like a way of keeping your credentials away from your code base or away from version control, because at the end of the day, we are going to most likely push this to GitHub before we deploy on our server or even to our server straight. So having environment variables is a way of keeping our credentials secure. And then of course we then use connect the environment variables we connect to the environment variables in the code base and then access the credentials from the environment variables. In fact, it makes your application more flexible in the sense that this secret key, for example, it's not really ideal to just leave your secret key like this in the code base. Especially if you want to deploy it, you can see it. Keep the secret key used in production secret. This was coming from Django. You don't just put your secret key like this in your Django project. So you can remove this. So let me just show how to create an environment variable. It's very easy. Just create a new file and then call it .env. That's all. Then inside this .env, you can now have all your settings like secret key equals to, let me copy this. Then it's as easy as that. So you can have as many environmental variables. You can have API key. Maybe you're using Mapbox as your library. You can have your Mapbox access token, and then you can put the access and just start random code from Mapbox. If you're using Flutter for your payments integration, you can have Flutter, I think we call it Rave API key, and then put it. So you don't just put the exact value in your code. You define everything here. And even aside the fact of security, it also makes it easy for you to change stuff. You can have test access token and you can have a production access token. So because everything is right here, you can just easily change them and swap them. Instead of you changing everything, you're trying to search here for secret key and then changing it everywhere in your code. You can just change it one place and to pick it up everywhere in your code. And they even so this is like the default way. This is like the inbuilt Python way. And if you want to read it here, you use the OS library, import OS, and from the OS you can use os.get So by default, getEnv is going to read this environment variable right here. So then you pass in what you want to read, secret key, which is what we have defined here. This guy right here, secret key. So it's going to read it, and then automatically update it right here. The same thing with your debug. You can decide to make this an environment variable and have it here as well. Debug equals to true. So you can decide also change it to false over here, and then the same thing, os.getEnv. And then this is where issue comes. And the issue is that when you're using secret key or environment variables in Django, it doesn't know, it only uses string. It only keep these guys as string. So this true now, instead of being a boolean, it's going to turn to true as string. Meanwhile, this guy right here, debug, needs a really true boolean, like normal true in Django, or false. Right, so os.getEnv treats everything as string, which is very good for this guy. Like secret key is expected to be string anyways. And mailbox access token is usually string. But when you want to start dealing with values like debug, which is boolean, true or false, you have to start doing manual conversion like that would be bool. Well, I think there's not sure it's bool, but I think there's so there's this thing called string to bool. Yeah, I don't know where this library is from, where this module is, this function is from. Okay, this is where it's coming from. So there's this string to bool that converts a string to bool. So you can of course use that function right here, and it's going to convert this whatever you have here to bool. But even aside that, there might be environment variables that requires a list, like this one, for example, allowed host. You might want your allowed host to be dynamic. For example, earlier I said we can use this for now, and when we are done deploying, we then make the change and then redeploy again. That's a lot of stress. Assuming we have environment variable, we can just define, of course, start with asterisk in the environment variable, and after we are done deploying, instead of redeploying the app, like editing the code again, we just edit the environment variables on the deployment platform that we're going to be using, in this case, Heroku. And that's what we need to do. Then I think this one showed that we can use string to bool to cast it. For list, it's difficult to convert this string right here to list. So there's a library I would recommend for us to use, and it's called Python decouple. So this guy right here makes it easy for us to cast between different Python data types, from strings to list. You can see it's even explain why not use environment variables. It's say when you have an environment variable like debug equals to false, you can see. So I use this actually in production. I use it for allowed host and for cross. This guy right here, this cross allowed origin stuff, I use it for it as well. So instead of me typing everything inside my settings, I just type them in my environment variables as comma separated values, comma the next site I want to allow to give cross access to. In that order, I just comma separate them, and then I use this decouple right here to cast it to list. So it can cast stuff to list. Let me see if I can see it right here. Yeah, this is it. It even shows the example of using allowed host. So you just use the lambda function to strip and then split with comma. So you can then you have this list right here, which is what your allowed host wants, a list and not string. So you can see there are a lot of helpful packages to make our work easier. But it's just always important to know the reason why these packages exist and when to use them and when not to use them. If what you want to do is just a simple environment variables, you don't need to add a decouple to your package. Just use the simple stuff. And if you want to use true, since it's just this, you can use the string to bool function that converts a string to a boolean. So, and this function is inbuilt, so it also reduces your package so my packages. You can see it's even train error. So let me just remove this. Let's use the number first. I don't want us to install any package, so I just use this first. Yeah, this is just by the way. So these are part of the things that you need to know when you're working on production projects. Environment variables is very important, and these environment variables, not sure if I have a git ignore here. So when you are deploying to git, I don't know, you already work with the git there, so usually this git ignore file. So you usually ignore environment variables when you're deploying to git. So just specify that ignore environment variables so that when you're pushing your code to git, so push all this your secret stuff to GitHub to prevent public access. Okay, so that's about environment variables. So disabling DRF browsable interface. So I was going to talk about this before, but I even figured that when your debug is forced, the DRF interface does not even load very well, and it's further documentation. But let me just see if I can quickly get my hands on it right here. So this DRF it's not even loading. I can't even show you the difference, how it looks like, the difference to make. Let me just specify a default. Yes. So this guy are dictionaries anyways. So you know how dictionaries, how gets works in the dictionaries. You can specify a default. Just stay away for it. Let's hope it works now anyways. And even aside the couple, I think there's also another library that you can use. Yes, it's working. I think it's using this default because this guy can be funny sometimes. So that's why I use some of these libraries that fixed all the issues. There is Django.env. I'm not sure if it's Django.env or okay, yeah, Django.env. So this Django.env library also solves that issue. Let me go to the GitHub page so you can see if you go start it. So that's another thing I would recommend when you're using some of these libraries, always give them a star. So this is actually a very old library, but it still works. It's funny as my sound. It works, so it's very old and I'm not sure it's being maintained. The last time it was updated was in 2020. And it's because it's working anyway, so not too much to update. You can check the code base .m.py to see what's happening under the hood. You can see a lot of regex is happening here. So it's very interesting anyways. But I think I use this decouple. Yeah. So I recommend you use this decouple. It's recent and I love this cast feature. Last by the way, so there's a way you can actually disable this interface. That's what you see would just be this JSON stuff. I can't really recall where it is right here. Yeah, renderers. This is it. So they are called renderers. So this guy is rendering a response using the inbuilt rendering engine. But you can actually set this to, you can set the default rendering class to just JSON renderer. For now, it's using the browsable API renderer, which is this one that you can browse. Still can't really figure out why this interface is not as beautiful as it was the previous day. I won't let that delay us. So let me just add this renderer right here. Just put comma here and then. So this, let me comment this browsable renderer, and then we have just JSON renderer. So when you use JSON renderer, the API will not return that browsable stuff to you. All you see will be JSON, which is what the front end needs. And the beauty of that is also like is a security check. You don't want your API to have that browsable interface that anyone can be able to. Yeah, you can see this render now. This is purely JSON. No, those stuff that we were seeing before, they're not there anymore. And this is the best. Just send JSON to the front end. In fact, that renderer takes time as well, and it also reduces your response to the front end. Then talking about reducing response, there's a library you can also use to profile your API. So let me just add it here. API profiling. So this is where you get to know the speed of your API or the response time of your API. So there's this library you can use, DJBT Django. I'm not exactly sure that's the name. Joseph Django profiling library. Man, I can't really remember this library. Yeah, I think this is it. Django Silk. I've also started it. So this library right here will give you this interface where you can be able to see your response to the front end and the speed it's taking. In fact, you see the SQL query. I so much love it. Like you see the SQL query, Django has this ORM feature that it helps us to write all our queries. All these Django.querySet.filter.this.that. At the end of the day, Django is converting them to pure SQL query that is now executing on the database. So this library right here will let you see the query that's actually going under the hood, and you see the speed. So it's also help you to know how to improve your API. Maybe you are doing too much of Python stuff. You can be able to optimize your API, and then your API will be faster because you don't want to keep the front end relies solely on the API. So you don't want to keep your clients waiting when making requests. Of course, in this age and world, there's a way we do it now that the clients will now start showing this loading screen and this skeleton loading. But you don't want too much of that because the attention span of users on your platform is so slow. You get so if I scroll down, for example, now you start seeing loading stuff. You can see it's still coming up very fast. You can see this loading stuff right here. Even at that, it's still pretty fast. So your API must be very fast. So with this profiling, I'm not sure it's Django Silk actually. I can't really remember. Okay, it's Django Debug, Abi. God, this is funny. Yeah, Django Debug toolbar. Here it is. So this one is the one I actually use. Yeah, I also have visited these URLs before. So yeah, this is the one I use. Django Debug toolbar. It's usually by the side right here. You see it's more like the same work with Silk anyways. The same work with Silk. So that once you'll be able to see all this stuff right here, the API queries, the SQL, the one that is taking the longer period of time to run. You can see them in red. You just want to fetch all your to-do list items and it's taking over 1 minute for you to run. And that's very funny. So these guys here would show it to you what's happening and why it's happening, so you can then minimize the query or optimize the query, and then your API will be very fast. So it's very important, like very, very important when it comes to building APIs. You need to profile your API. Okay, now let's go to Heroku. So After you're done building your API, the next thing you want to do is to deploy it. There are a lot of ways you can deploy API. You can deploy it on your own computer. Of course, that means you need to keep your computer alive and uh, like on 247, and your computer must be the internet connectivity of your computer must be very fast. Um, your computer must be very powerful when it comes to RAM and speed, because at the end of the day, all these server we are talking about is still a computer that is just somewhere in another country, not on the cloud, literally. So the cloud is just a data center where they have thousands and millions of computers, which of course is abroad. It's usually abroad. So even if it's not abroad, there's usually 247 power. Like the power there is constant. So that's why on our website, whenever you visit it to midnight, anytime, it's always accessible because the server, that is the computer where it's installed, is always alive, and the network connectivity is very high as well. So that's actually what happens. So you can actually turn your computer to a server if you can provide the resources to keep your computer alive, and then you can also prevent attacks like hacking and those kind of stuff. So that's why people use cloud and PaaS, such as, so PaaS means platform as a service. So this guys makes it easy for us to deploy our application. So Roku is a PaaS. Then Roku relies on AWS, Amazon Web Service. In fact, this guy, a lot of companies rely on it. A lot of companies. And this AWS relies on servers. It has a lot of data centers all over the country, all over the continent, where it stores, where it has a lot of computers. Then provides access to them over the internet for people to install their websites, their API, their backend, and everything. So AWS actually has another PaaS. It's called Elastic Beanstalk. It's like a PaaS for AWS, more like Roku counterpart or a Roku alternative. In fact, I explored this Elastic Beanstalk because some weeks ago, Roku released that there will be no free tier of their dinos again. I think starting from November. So even after this session, whatever API or whatever platform you create on Roku, you have to delete it after this session before November. Otherwise, you're going to incur some costs. But it's just for demonstration purposes. That's why I want to show us how to deploy on Roku. So if you are building a project for freestyle, I will really encourage us to use AWS. Like we should start thinking in the direction of AWS. Otherwise, if you can afford $7 per month and even more, why not? You can use Elastic Beanstalk, or you can use Heroku. But AWS has a lot of free tier. I think we can also explore. But it's very technical. That's why I don't want to go into that, because you have to start spinning up our own EC2 servers. We have to start dockerizing our application, which is another concept. Maybe I can talk about that if there's still time. After we are done deploying our application. Okay, so there are a lot of them. We have DigitalOcean. They call it DO. So I'm using this acronym so that in case you see these guys, you know what it means. DO is DigitalOcean. You have Python Anywhere. We have even Google. You have Google Cloud. You have Azure. You have your server. You can of course have the resources, etc. Take Amazon, man. Okay, Amazon is AWS. I think it's IBM Cloud as well. So what these guys just do is they provide you a server. So like this AWS, they do it bare metal. So they provide a server for you to do everything yourself. You install Python on the server, you install everything on the server. Why Heroku is very easy. It's a platform as a service that does everything for you. Just push your code. It's going to do the deployments for you. Like it's very actually that's why I love it. It's very easy, but now that there's no free. I use it for free project a lot of free projects. For those that know GIS chatbots on Twitter, that's where I deployed it. But now that there's no more free tier, I have to move it to AWS eventually. And enjoy AWS free tier. So the first thing you want to do for Heroku is to, of course, create an account. So if you don't have an account, you have to create one. So this is Heroku, Heroku.com. Create an account. Oh, dashboard. Okay, I'm surprised. Let's log in. So when you create an account, um, I want to show us. It's very easy to create an account. I want to show us um this thing, the the user interface, because all these things can also be done on the command line. But let me just show us how it's done on the UI. Okay, the news is over here. Starting from November 28th, free Dinos, free Postgres will no longer be available. This is one of the reasons why I also used SQLite for the for our database. But I not use Postgres because of the deployment. So so when you log into Heroku, just create a new app. It's very easy, and then give it a small name. Just give it a random name. But let me give it to do list tests or something. To do this will be taken. I'm very sure of that. Then I know 1, 2, good. Then create the app. So yeah, so that's the first. Then the next now is to do the deployment. So there are different ways to deploy. You can deploy from the command line, which is what I actually recommend. It's very smooth. You can also connect to GitHub. It's also smooth. They also, but I think some months ago they had security issues with GitHub. That's the authentication system or something. I think there's a security breach with GitHub repository that are connected to Heroku. So that was very encouraged and advised to use the command line strictly. And since then, I've really been enjoying the command line, because before I just pushed to GitHub and automatically it get deployed to Heroku. I think that was what I told us on the first day, that Heroku uses webhook. They use webhook for that communication. So as soon as GitHub receives my updates, Heroku webhook receive that signal and pull my code. It's just like a git pull my code from my repo, and do the deployment. So yeah, that's by the way. And so yeah, let's use Git. So this guy is very easy. You need to download and install the Heroku CLI first. So you can open this on a new tab, and then you can see how to install it. It's very easy. For Mac, this is how you install it. For Windows, just download the one that works on your system. If you're on a 64-bit or 32-bit system, just download and install. It's very straightforward. So after you're done installing it, then you need to log in from the command line. I think I must have done this, but let's see. It's very easy. Just paste Heroku login. That's after you are done installing the downloaded Heroku CLI. So press any key, press something on my keyboard. So it's expected to open up my browser. And then I need to, so it's going to open your browser automatically. If it's not opening it, you can just copy this UI right here. And then click on login. So IP address mismatch. So this happens a lot. I think one of the ways to solve that is, so I think it's because I already have I've already logged in here, but let me see if I can just incognito mode. But I'm very sure you shouldn't experience that issue. Very sure of that. So let me try if I can use incognito mode and see if it's gonna work. But the same thing. Interesting. So let me reduce them. Let me do it again. Yeah, close this. But I'm certain you shouldn't experience that issue because I actually did it yesterday and I didn't experience it. So something must be happening. And even if you experience it, um, there's nothing of your experience that hasn't been experienced before. So you can run to Stack Overflow to see how to solve that IP address mismatch Heroku login. So you can see a lot of people have experienced it before. So you can see the command that they asked us to copy and paste. So let's try it. Let's see if it's going to work. Come on, come on, come on, come on. So while that is working, so there's something I've not mentioned. Can I have a Roku deployment process here? So there are some things that we need to do before we can be able to deploy our application to Roku. I mean, we can deploy it right away, but we're going to experience some bug while doing that. And we can avert those bugs. Maybe I should even allow us to experience it so we can see how it looks like. But so the thing is, Django. Okay, so I think this is okay. Yeah, that's correct. Holy shit! I don't know the password of fund. I think I should just cancel this login session. I already have I've logged in. Um, let me see. Yeah, I think I've already logged in before. Well, in case you haven't, let me see if I can check the apps. We can see that I'm just created. Please don't tell me to log in. Oh, my IP address mismatch. Oh, really? It's working. Logged in. Nice. Perfect. So I've logged in. So you can see that app that we created on the dashboard. It's going to show it now. To do lists, uh, tests 1, 2. This one we have right here. Thank you, Stack Overflow. This one right here. To do list test 1, 2, so you can see it. So yeah, as I was saying, so that's the first step, which is very good. So Django itself uses what we call WSGI, which is an acronym for Web Server Gateway Interface. Let me see if I can write it here. Like that's what Django used to serve application. However, as people advance, as applications, as we get to build more larger applications, a lot of requests keeps coming in. So we need to start building system to allow our application to serve multiple requests at the same time, either parallelly, I think either at parallel or concurrently, to ensure that the client, that's the front end, either mobile application or web application or any devices, the client gets response very fast and our server is LD. So we have GUnicorn. So this unicorn right here is ideally you can, when you do Python manage the PY run server, you're actually serving your Django application using this guy, which is actually here. Go to API, you see it here, WSGI, you can see it. You go to manage the PY, you see what's happening here. Django settings module, please. So this guy, WSGI is, as simple as this thing looks like, it's doing a lot of work, a lot of heavy work. So this was run my application actually. This guy, this guy. There's also ASGI. So ASGI is the asynchronous version of WSGI. I'm not going to that. So, but it's not really powerful. It's not. It can work in production, but it's not recommended to use it in production. You can't really do much. You can just make say thousands of requests and your server will shut down. I'm not even sure it can handle it. So that's why we have Gunicorn, which is like an interface between our server and the world, right? Or maybe a reverse proxy. So Gunicorn serves our application. So instead of doing Python manage your PY server, we do Gunicorn, then add some commands to run our server. So this Gunicorn makes it makes serving our API requests much faster and much better in the sense that if requests are getting too much, it can spin up um, a new thread, for example, to make to handle the requests. Like there are a lot of complexities that go into it actually. But the end goal is to ensure that our server is very powerful and is capable of serving thousands and multiple requests. You can imagine, although I'm not sure Google are using Gunicorn, but just think of any startup or any organization that is serving millions of people. Of course, you can already know that, okay, Python manage the PY is not enough to do that. It's not capable of doing that. So this guy right here is a web server, independent web server, and they undo and do those kind of. So they spin up a lot of processes, a lot of threads. They use server resources to serve the Django application. So in front of that is what we call Engine X. So Engine X is just one of the also the web servers, and it's majorly used for reverse proxy. So these are things that might be complex, but I'm very sure as we advance in this space, you get to understand them. So this guy right here is used for reverse proxy. So what does it do when you, say for example, make a request to https www.x.com and it sits at your server? Nginx will just convert this to http www.x.com and vice versa, depending on your configuration. So it can do that kind of reverse proxy. When you make a request on IP address, engineers can change it to another thing. So when your request is entering port 80, so all API requests, of course, all API requests that are not secured go to port 80, like all this HTTP and port 80. When your request enter port 80 on the web server, it just can now redirect it to the original port of Django, which is port 8000. So Nginx now return it to like that's like what they call reverse proxy. Nginx gets the request from the world anywhere on this port. If you add port 80 to be behind anything, you won't like it's more like still making requests to the same URL. Some security you can see. Connection to this side is not secure because port 80 is HTTP by default. And of course, this is Django website, so they'll definitely be using Django as their own backend. So they probably have done this setting to only ensure they get only secured API requests. So that's why it's showing this error that we saw earlier when I tested it on our own the application. So that's port 80. It's usually HTTP. But when you now go to when it gets to Nginx as HTTP, it's now reversed this HTTP to HTTPS. Depending on your configuration, if you want to accept HTTP, it's fine. There are some sites that are not secured. In fact, you see it here not secured. Nothing may happen. So you can just direct it from that HTTP to still HTTP Django port, which is port 8000. However, if you want your site secured, you can make your Nginx to listen to port 443. So port 443 is port for HTTPS. I've not tried this before, but let's see. Oh wow, you can see it works. So it's a port for HTTPS. So if you put 443 here, it's going to return to the same thing. So when it gets to Nginx, Nginx gets it as HTTPS. and you can decide to turn it to HTTP depending on how you configure it, or even return it to a different website, or redirect it to a different route and then send you a 301 permanent redirect. So there are a lot of complexities that happen here, and these are things that Heroku has taken away. This Nginx Heroku has taken it away. So what you just need to worry about is Gunicon. So you install Gunicon by doing pip install Gunicon. In my own case, it will be pipenv because I'm using the virtual environment. So when you install Gunicon, so in Heroku, when you are deploying something to Heroku, you need to define this file called proc file. I actually done it here, 5 days ago. So it's very easy. Let me just cut this and delete this. So at the root of your application, just create a new file called proc file. Then there's this command that you use to run your application on the proc file. And this is the Gunicon. You can see I'm not putting Python manage.py or somebody. I'm doing this Gunicon. And Gunicon uses the WSGI, which by default is the interface to Django. Like I have explained, this gateway interface. So just provide Gunicon the path to that WSGI. That's what you need to do. That's what I've done here. Like Gunicon have this WSGI file that is in my API module. That's why I use .wsgi. So API.wsgi. Then this log file is just to let Heroku receive the log from this Gunicon. That's also something that I did not mention, logging. So logging is also a way of, I'm not sure we can mention it anyways, but you can read up on that. Logging is very important in building an application. So there are a lot of configurations. So Gunicon is accessible. Just type Gunicon. You can see documentation of Gunicon. There are a lot of settings. You can specify the number of threads. You can see this is right here. You can specify the number of threads you want to use, the number of processes you want to spin up, number of workers you want to use, and etc. So Gunicon is, so you can do a lot of configurations. Actually, it's a different world on its own. The different world on its own entirely. So, but it's also interesting, very interesting. So this command, you just put it in the proc file, and this is what you open it to deploy our application. So another thing Heroku needs is this file called runtime.txt, which is basically where we provide Heroku with the Python version we're using for our application. So you create a new file, runtime.txt, and then you put the Python version there. There are a lot of different Python versions you can, of course, search online. Like, so it's called Heroku Python build pack, or I don't know if it's Heroku Python version. So yeah, is this. So you can see ahead. So there are different types of Python runtimes that is supported. So you can see it's 3.7, 3.8, 3.10, which is the latest version of Python. So and you can see the Heroku stack that it supports Heroku. It's in Heroku 20. So what that means is, if you go to settings, for example, you will see the Heroku version you're using, the Heroku stack you're using. So we are currently using Heroku 22. And then if you go back to that Python support, so you can see if you use Python 3.8.15, you get an error because it's not supported on this stack, which is stack 22. So you have to start from Python 3.9.15. That was the error actually faced some days ago, but this is the solution. Specify a Python version that is supported on your current stack, which is Heroku stack 22. So that's another thing you need to do. And what else? So we're not really using a DB, so we just leave this as it is. Then since I'm using pipenv, I can deploy it like this. without any issues. But if you're using a virtual env that is not pipenv, you need to provide the requirements.txt, and that's very easy by just doing pip freeze, then this arrow, that is, let me save it in this file, requirements.txt, and then you save it and press enter. So that's going to create a new requirement.txt for you, and this is what Heroku will use when deploying your application. But I don't need to have it because Heroku also supports pip file when deploying our application, and you'll see it shortly. Then what else? Then white noise. So white noise is the way we serve static files, which are all these admin UI, Django REST framework UI, etc. Swagger documentation, any static files. We use white noise for it. So I've actually installed white noise. Check my file. You see it here. White noise has been installed. So it's also easy as well. Just do pipenv, or in your case pip install white noise. So this white noise also has documentation. White noise. So this one helps us to serve static files. So it's very easy. Just install it and then put it after the security middleware. You can see I already have it requirement to satisfy. So by the way, there isn't pipenv. This is also another way of running a pip command. You can either do pipenv install white noise or pipenv run pip install. This right? I'm used to using pip. So yeah, under settings, I have it on my middleware already. I comment it out, so I'll just uncomment it. This white noise here. So let me just uncomment it right here. So white noise will handle all our static files, and then when you set static, when you set white noise in your middleware, you need to also set the static root. So this is where you want white noise to put all your static routes, because when you are deploying a Django application, Django run a command called collect static, manage.py collect static. So this guy goes through all your application, goes through all the library you installed, all your templates, and then bring all those static files and put them in a single folder. So it's the folder you specify here that's going to put them. So yeah, I used to specify static files for my own. And this base directory is basically this folder right here. So no, this one, this API folder. So what Django will do is Django will just create a new folder called static files. Then all your static files will be saved by white noise. So when you have all those installed, let's just follow the steps here. So the next is just to seed into your project. We are already in our project. Then initialize Git. I'm not sure if I have Git. Let me just press this. Then you can just be copying this one actually. Just set that Git repository to remote for Heroku. And after you do that, then add, commit, and push to Heroku master. So you can do that, add everything, commit, first deployment, then it push Heroku master. So because you are deploying on the command line, you'll be seeing everything that is deploying on Heroku. So Heroku will show you that it's compressing, building source. You can see Python app detected. You see Python version specified in runtime, which is this one. So it's going to use this Python version and specified in runtime. Then you can see installing dependencies with pipenv. So detecting I have pipenv, which is this pip file here, and it's installing all my dependencies: Django REST framework, Unicorn for serving our server, white noise for serving static files. This one is for documentation. This one is for course support. And then what's the next thing it's doing? Collecting static file using that command I mentioned, Python manage.py collect static, and of course no inputs. That's to enable the code to run without asking for any user input or something. Then to tell you that 197 files has been copied to this folder, which is what we specified in our settings file. And then you can see this thing again. Yoko is telling us again that see on the 20th of November there will be no free dino again. So after we are done deploying this, I would have to delete the application because I don't want to incur any cost and I don't want you to incur any cost as well. So when you are done deploying it, it's important you delete it after you are done. So yeah, our app has been deployed. Let me just follow this URL and see if it works. Okay, so I think it works. We don't really have any URL.py that is returning a response to the base URL. So I think we have admin. So let's see if admin will work. Perfect. So admin will work. Then we have what else? To do's. So to do is working. Awesome. So that's the end. So we already disabled that browserable interface, so we can't really create a to-do. Of course, there are different ways to create a to-do. We can do it. Let me see if I can do it with Swagger. We can access our documentation. Perfect. So our documentation is working, so we can create a to-do from here. We can try it out. Say new task completed with the first. Of course, we are just creating it, so not completed. Perfect, and it's returned 201, which means created. It returned the time and the date it was created. And then if you notice, the server here is GUnicorn and not WSGI. This is very important. So, and you can see the request duration 341 milliseconds. Well, that's actually high. That's too slow to some extent because we're just creating a small to do. But it's a good start. And so if I go to do's now, I think we should have 6. Yeah, we now have the new task we just created. So this is what you give to the front end. This guy right here, Swagger. This is what the front end guy needs to work with to integrate your API on the front end. So having this now, this is what we're going to use to integrate on the React application we're going to be building. So I think this is all for Django REST framework. I really hope I'm able to explain the concept and dilute the whole complexities of Django REST framework, and I really hope you understand the concept and the whole idea up to this point. And of course, should you have any question or any challenges, you can always drop it on the group, and I'll be very happy to respond. So if we still have time, I can give us a bit of background on React. Otherwise, we can start React on Monday. But I really implore us to try out this and deploy our application on Heroku. You can see it as easy as this. You just have an API deployed that can be integrated. And of course, if you go to your Heroku website and you go to resources, you would see overview. Reload this actually. It should be that GUnicorn stuff we created should be here. Yeah, this should be here. This GUnicorn. So this command that we created is actually this right here. That's GUnicorn, that proc file. So this proc file is unique to Heroku. And I think DigitalOcean also uses it. So this GUnicorn command is right here. So if you go to more and you go to view logs, you can see all the API request that is coming to your application. You can see this is the one that comes to Swagger. You can see everything right here. So that's the idea of having that log, this right here, log file. Okay, so this log file is, I think this one is not to create any log file actually. Because by default, GUnicorn creates log files. So I think having it as icon is don't create a log file. I'm not exactly sure actually. But this log here is always handy when you're working with stuff and you don't know what's happening. Let me try and make a get request for all our to-dos. See if Heroku is going to log it. Of course, so you can see get request. It's going to show you the URL it's coming from, and even the system browser you're using, which is Chrome. And because we have originated our API, you see this page here to tell you the page number you want to make a request to. If you're trying to create, and if you go to the module, I think you're able to see our documentation, that help text. This completed, you can see the help text we use, the status of the task. So this is also very helpful for front-end developers to know, not even front-end, even yourself, because sometimes you might have forgotten what a particular variable is representing. So this help text is usually helpful for you to know what it means. And everything is right here under the models, under this help text. You can see it reflecting on the front end. So of course, there are a lot of things, a lot more that we've not even touched. But hopefully, as we start, even in React, if maybe while developing in React, we experience some issues with the API, can always come back to modify and yeah. So thank you so much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now. Otherwise, we can always communicate bilaterally on the chat or via DMs. So my advice would be to practice this, and since we have from now till Monday, to be good to practice this, deploy it yourself, and see how the whole concept fits in together. And yeah, because that's how it gets to stick. So if you have any issues, of course, always ask. Thank you very much.